for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.
Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 1 Episode 13 review of the Scooby Doo Show. So last time I reviewed issue number 3 of the Scooby Doo Where Are You comic book series by Gold Key Comics, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. But of course today, I'll be covering Season 1 Episode 13 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled Scooby Doo, Where's the Crew?, which was released on November 27th, 1976. The short synopsis of the episode is, when the gang go on a cruise aboard the Sea Prowler, they encounter the ghost of Captain Pescado, the octopus monster, and the kelp monster after their professor disappears. So as per usual, I'll be watching Season 1 Episode 13 of the Scooby Doo Show on the Scooby Doo Dynamite Hour, the complete series DVD. This DVD has every episode of Season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show, as well as every episode of Dynamite. Unfortunately, this is only the only physical media release of Season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show. So if you want to watch Season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show on any sort of DVD or physical copy of some sort, this is your only option. But you get the added bonus of Dynamite if you're also a fan of the Dynamite Show. Now, as far as this episode's reception is concerned, I'm not really sure how Scooby Doo fans feel about this particular episode. I don't hear the Scooby Doo community talk about it a lot. The Scooby Doo Show is not a very highly talked about show, besides a couple of episodes. So I guess there's really only one way to find out whether this episode's good, bad, or average. So, let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the Scooby Doo Show. The episode begins with Professor Poisson, a world-renowned oceanographer who's on a quest assigned to him by the museum to go and retrieve artifacts from a sunken ship named the Diablo Doro. Along with him are, of course, the members of Mystery Inc., Shaggy, Scooby, Daphne, Velma, and Fred. They board a ship named the Sea Prowler. But the boat's operator, Mr. Carp, warns the professor and the gang that Diablo Doro is guarded by the ghost of Captain Pescado and his sea monster crew. The professor tells the kids these are just stories and then informs the captain that they are over the Diablo Doro. They drop anchor and go to bed. That night, Scooby, Freddy, and Shaggy see Captain Pescado's ghost, a kelp monster, and an octopus monster outside their window in the ocean. They inform the girls and go on deck to check it out. There they find wet footprints leading onto the boat, and suddenly Captain Pescado appears, as well as the kelp monster, and they chase the gang around the boat. They run into Professor Poisson and warn him. Mr. Carp and the deckhands board a lifeboat and decide to row to port because of the ghost. Keep this in mind for later, because this is an inconsistency I'm going to bring up later on when the villain's identity is revealed. So the next morning, the gang finds the professor's cabin ransacked and Professor Poisson gone. On the floor, there is a secret code with the letter IMCMMSC, which is their first clue. They decide to look for Professor Poisson. Scooby and Shaggy go into the galley and get locked inside by the octopus, while Daphne, Velma, and Fred get locked inside a room but manage to escape through a ventilation funnel. They look for Shaggy and Scoop but get separated, and Velma gets locked in the engine room. She climbs out through the smokestack where she can see the lifeboat that the captain and the deckhands got in. The gang reunites and discovers the lifeboat is empty and battered, covered in kelp and wet footprints. They split up, with Velma, Shag, and Scoob going to the radio room to try and send a distress signal, while Fred and Daphne try to find the professor. Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby send part of a distress message using Morse code, but in doing so, they alert the kelp monster, who's asleep for some reason, don't know why a kelp monster would be sleeping, and the octopus monster. And the two aquatic goons chase all three of them. Fred and Daphne witness Captain Pescado diving back down to the wreck, and then meet up with Scooby, Shaggy, and Velma. Shaggy, Scooby, and Velma equip scuba suits and dive down to the Diablo Doro, and upon entrance, they discover air tanks, with Velma asking the question, what does a ghost and a sea monster need with scuba tanks? Scooby accidentally smashes through an old wall and finds a treasure room as well as the ghost and the sea monsters. Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby are chased back up to the Sea Prowler, and there they find the villains who have gotten there first and shove Fred and Daphne into a closet. The ghosts then jump back into the water, and the gang decide to lift the submarine back into the hole, preventing the monsters from getting aboard. Velma explains that they must be taking the treasure from the wreck and hiding it on board, and with the help of some metal detectors that Shaggy and Scooby found, they find the treasure locked up in the brig along with a bound Professor Poisson. They try to go radio for help, but Pescado, the kelp monster, and the octopus monster climb on board via the ladder and chase Velma, Daphne, and the professor around the boat, while Fred, Shaggy, and Scooby manage to trap Pescado and the sea goons in a net. I love this final chase scene because it gives Fred a chance to come up with a spur-of-the-moment trap, it gives a chance for Daphne and Velma to be bait, and Shaggy and Scooby get to help capture the villains as well, and Professor Poisson gets to play a role in it as well. And I don't know if I've been saying his name correctly because it's a hard name to pronounce, but the professor is a great character, and I love that he gets involved and becomes bait for the trap, as well as Daphne and Velma. I know it's a spur-of-the-moment trap, but I do like that Daphne, Velma, and the professor act as bait for a spur-of-the-moment trap that Fred creates, and then Shaggy and Scooby ultimately catch them. So yeah, final chase scene, really good. The gang thinking on their feet and capturing the villains just before the Coast Guard arrives.
Zoinks! We forgot the boarding ladder was over the side. One more lap around the deck house, Velma. I've a plan to catch those creeps. Quick, on the cargo net. Ready, guys?
I hope so.
Up you go.
This time around, Professor.
I don't know what you kids have planned, Velma, but I am game.
Here they come, Shag. On your mark, get set, nets away!
Like I think we turned loose with the wrong hands.
Nice work, Shag! Hang on, Scooby, hang on!
Looks like everything is under control. You mean under the net.
Ahoy, sea prowler!
So as I mentioned before, the Coast Guard arrives in time to witness the outcome, and the ghost of Captain Pescado is unmasked as Mr. Carp. No surprise there. And the kelp monster and the octopus monster are unmasked as McFinn and McGill, the deckhands. Not surprising either. They're the only suspects in the episode. Which begs the question, these three men were the ones that left in the boat, like I said earlier, which is the inconsistency I'm going to bring up just now. I'm honestly curious what Carp and the deckhands would have done if Shaggy and Scooby or any of the rest of the gang or the professor had chosen to go in that boat. Would they have taken them back to port and then come back to steal the treasure? Would they have tied them up and captured them and then come back to the boat? Would they have disposed of them, like possibly killed them? Possibly not, because in the episode, Mr. Carp and his deckhands aren't particularly, dangerous. They don't really threaten the gang. In fact, they're more annoyed by them. They tend to lock them up in rooms and tie them up rather than kill them. So I don't think they would have disposed of them, but it's just a curious thought, like, maybe would they have done that? Would they have brought them back to port? Would they have captured them? Would they have killed them? I don't know. It's an interesting question, and I wonder why Carp and the deckhands would offer that. I'm assuming because they had no intentions of killing them, Carp and his deckhands probably would have either brought them back to port, or they would have kidnapped them, like the professor, and bound them in some part of the ship after they had, docked for away from the ship and rowed to port. Still an interesting thought, and I thought I'd at least mention it. The scribble note IMC MMSC is wrong, as the professor points out that it's close, but not correct, and that's not the message he put. But Velma corrects herself by saying that the I is in fact a 1, making it 1MC MMSC, with 1MC standing for First Mate Carp, and MM means McFinn and McGill, the 2 deckhands. So a keen observer would have read that message and probably been able to deduce that Carp and the deckhands were the villains, even though they're the only suspects in the episode. I do like that message, if you're paying attention enough, you could look at that message and be like, okay, what does that message mean? And you could deduce that Carp and his deckhands could be the villain. The SC meant Professor Poisson was trying to right scuba divers before he was attacked. Mr. Carp was trying to steal the treasure from the wreck and haul it back on board, and the air tanks that Velma, Scooby, and Shaggy saw proved that the alleged ghosts they had seen weren't ghosts at all. And Scooby gets a laugh from wearing the treasures from the Diablo Doro after Shaggy calls him the $6 million dog, which is a nice little nod to the $6 Million Man, a TV show that was airing at the time. And the episode ends with Scooby responding by just giggling. Hey guys, it's Future Paul here. So while editing this video, I had a bit of a problem with my audio. I don't know what happened, but the audio on my microphone was messed up for the first bit of my outro section. So I'm going to quickly reiterate what I said, and then I'm going to leave you guys off with my final negative, which is where the audio gets back to its regular self and is much more better and precise. Again, don't know why the audio acted weird for that first bit, but thankfully it's not the whole outro section, so I'll just quickly reiterate to you guys what I said. So I gave Season 1, Episode 13 of the Scooby Doo Show 4 stars out of 5. So yeah, I gave it 4 stars because I found it to be a fun and enjoyable episode. There was a lot of good things about it. The gang was mostly on point. The villains were fun and entertaining. The setting was really great. Obviously, I have negatives that I'm going to go over quickly right here, and then bring you back to where I was in the original cut of this video, where the audio isn't bad, which is my final negative. So I'll quickly just go over the bit of negatives that I had that had weird audio in it for some reason. So my first negative is that I found McFinn and McGill outside of costume to be uninteresting. We didn't really get much of their characters. They were very nothing characters, very bland characters. We didn't really get to know them as characters. They did nothing. They didn't set up the backstory of the villains. They didn't do anything in the episode to stand out. So yeah, McFinn and McGill, not really interesting outside of costume. And then the other negative is that I found the motive of the episode to be bland and repetitive. So essentially the motive of Mr. Carp, McFinn, and McGill is that they wanted to scare the gang and the professor away so they could steal the treasure from the Diablo Doro. Sunken treasure, stealing sunken treasure from a sunken ship is nothing new. We've seen this in the Scooby Doo franchise. So it's very boring and repetitive because it's adding nothing new. It would be one thing if it had some sort of layers to it, because at least it would be somewhat unique and fresh, but no, there's no layers to it. We've seen treasure motives before, and this does nothing to reinvent that wheel. So yeah, very bland and repetitive money motive. That's all I got for my future self, so I'll hand it back over to my past self, where I go over my final negative, and then we'll go over my positives for the episode. Again, sorry about that, guys. Back to the video. And my final negative is that I think there were a lack of suspects in the episode. You really only have one suspect in the episode, which is Mr. Carp. You could maybe count McFinn and McGill, which would only add up to 3 suspects. They're debatable. I don't really know if I want to count them as suspects. You could. But even if we count them, there's 3 villains, and at most there's 3 suspects. So, yeah, I mean, it was obvious who the villains were, and it would have been better had they maybe bulked up the crew of the Sea Prowler. Had they maybe made some more crew members, we could have had a good bulky list of suspects. And also, we knew the professor was not going to be the villain because he would have never invited the gang if that was the case. And we knew that he was an ally. We knew he had good intentions. So he was never, ever on the radar as a suspect. We knew he was an ally of the gang. So yeah, they should have bulked up the suspect list for this episode, because if you're going to have 3 villains, you definitely need more than 3 suspects. But that's all I got for negatives, so let's get on to the positives for the episode and what makes this episode good. So starting with the positives, my first one is that I think Fred was a good leader in this episode. I think he played the leadership role very well. He fulfilled his usual role quite well, leading the gang on where to go next when the whole crew was missing. And I did like that he came up with a spur-of-the-moment trap. I did think that was cool that, you know, he came up with a trap on the fly. And while it wasn't his most inventive trap, I do like that he thought, you know, he was thinking on his feet and trapped the villain. So yeah, Fred was pretty good in this episode. He fulfilled his usual role of being a leader, and he created a cool spur-of-the-moment trap to capture the villains. Then we have Daphne. Daphne I thought was good because she helped be bait for the spur-of-the-moment trap that Fred came up with, along with Velma and the Professor. So I think that was cool. Even though it wasn't planned, I did like that Daphne got to be bait this time, technically. And I also did like that she had a funny little interaction with Velma when they capture the villains. And Velma says, "Looks like it's under control." And Daphne's like, "You mean under the net?" Which was a nice little joke for Daphne and Velma. A nice little moment for them. And I did like that, and that Daphne got to tell a nice little joke to Velma, which we see a few times here and there, but it always is good to see those kind of moments. But yeah, Daphne wasn't the strongest, but I will say that I did like that she got to act as bait for Fred's spur-of-the-moment trap, so she at least fulfilled some kind of role in this episode. Next, we have Velma. I thought Velma was good in this episode. She helped piece together the clues to help solve the mystery, and she was a bit of a good leader in this episode. So yeah, Velma fulfilled her usual role of piecing together the clues to help solve the mystery. Every time the gang collectively as a group found a clue, it felt like the gears were turning in her head and she was figuring out what was going on. I also did think that she was a bit of a leader in the episode at certain points, not as much as Fred, but she did have her moments. Most definitely when her Shaggy and Scooby went down to the Diablo Doro wreck, you know, the sunken ship of the Diablo Doro. She was definitely the one kind of leading that expedition for, you know, clues. I also did like that Velma, you know, we got to learn a little bit more about Velma, how she learned Morse code in Girl Scout camp, I believe she said. And so she was able to transmit an SOS signal, which I think was awesome. I did think that was cool that we got to learn a bit more about Velma and that she got to showcase that skill set that we hadn't seen before. So yeah, Velma was overall good in this episode, and she acted as bait as well for the spur-of-the-moment trap. So yeah, Velma did a lot in this episode, really good, was very strong in this episode. And last, but certainly not least, we have Shaggy and Scooby. Shaggy and Scooby were their usual funny, cowardly selves. They fulfilled their bare minimum roles. They were really fun in this episode, and they did help capture the villains of the episode. So yeah, they were of course their usual funny, cowardly selves, scared of the villains, and, you know, had a couple of good, funny moments throughout the episode. And they did help capture the villains at the end, along with Fred, not being the bait, but being the ones to drop the net on top of the villains. So I did think that was cool. And yeah, Shaggy and Scooby were overall, they fulfilled their basic role. What definitely wasn't their strongest outing, but they were pretty good. I had a fun enough time with them. I thought they were good in this episode. Then we have the villains of the episode, who I thought were all fun and entertaining. So you have the ghost of Captain Pescado, you have the octopus monster, and the kelp monster. They all stood out and were very unique due to their variety and their entertaining nature. What I mean by that is they were fun and entertaining due to, you know, not just their designs, but, you know, their chemistry and maniacal laughs. I also think that their structure was very unique in that it had a similar structure to Redbeard and his crew, I feel like, but it was unique because it changed the Redbeard crew structure to something new and different. Whereas Redbeard was the de facto main villain and had two lackeys who were presumably ghosts, although they acted more like humans. But, you know, two normal ghost lackeys, along with him being the main de facto villain of the episode. You have a similar structure with this, but Captain Pescado isn't the main de facto villain of the episode. And he doesn't have 2 ghosts as his crewmates, as his sidekicks. He has 2 sea monsters, an octopus monster and a kelp monster. I really like the Captain Pescado design because I feel like we've had like pirate designs before that have been so similar to Redbeard. So it's great to see a design for a pirate or captain, whatever you want to call it, a sea captain, to not be like Redbeard and to be somebody different. And I did like the kelp monster's look. I think the kelp monster had a really awesome look. The octopus monster, wasn't amazing, kind of lame, but I will say that they were still all fun and entertaining. Yeah, I think what made it fun and entertaining was the designs for all of them and the variety to it. That the fact that this ghost wasn't having 2 other human ghosts as his crewmates, but rather 2 sea monsters. I really found that cool and unique. And it took the structure of Redbeard and his crew, but changed it up and made it unique and different and very fun and entertaining to watch. So while none of them were really scary, with probably the kelp monster being the scariest out of the 3, but none of them were particularly scary. They didn't really do anything threatening or scary, at least in my opinion. They were fun and entertaining. I did like their dynamic. I did like their designs and the variety to them, and I overall had a good time with them. I feel like they were fun and enjoyable villains. Outside of costume, I thought Mr. Carp was a good character. I really liked Mr. Carp. We got to know him quite well. I really loved that he told the backstory of the villains, how he was telling these stories of the Diablo Doro and, Captain Moscato and his 2 sea monster crewmates, and how anytime, someone would try to get their treasure, would disappear, or be attacked. Like, it was really cool that he was setting up his alter ego very well. And Mr. Carp made a great impression. I feel like he was a fascinating and cool character, and I really enjoyed him as a character. I think outside of costume, he was the best because he got, good screen time, and his screen time was utilized well. So, yeah, I thought Mr. Carp, good, character outside of costume. He set up his alter ego well as his 2 deckhands alter egos very well as well. So, he overall set the mood and the villains very well. So, yeah, really good character outside of costume. I thought the mystery of the episode was really good. So, the mystery was just exactly what the title of the episode suggested. Where's the crew of the Sea Prowler? That was the main mystery. Because obviously, the professor went missing, and then we find out that Carp and his 2 deckhands didn't seem to make it to port. So you were wondering what happened to all these men, the crew of the Sea Prowler. Were they killed? Were they kidnapped? Were they turned into ghosts or sea monsters? There was a lot of intrigue on that, and what would happen with the Scooby Gang, and, what was going to happen to them if they got caught by the villains. Now, obviously, the villains did have a couple moments where they actively were trying to lock the gang up to get them out of the way. So it was very unlikely that the villains were killing anybody, but still, that was something that crossed your mind, because you never know with villains like these. And overall, I think the mystery was cool. We were wondering what happened to the professor and Mr. Carp and the 2 deckhands, McFinn and McGill, and what the sea monsters and Captain Pescado did with them. And when we found those answers out, they were very satisfying and entertaining. They were very satisfactory answers. So yeah, I think the mystery of the episode was good. It was very engaging and hooked me in. I thought the clues of the episode were really good. There was a good abundance of clues in this episode. So, of course, you had the notepad with the message on it. You had the air tanks that Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby found in the wreck. You had the metal detectors that Shaggy and Scooby found on the ship. And, of course, you have the treasure room. All of these point towards not only, the possible motive of the episode, but also narrow down the suspects, even though the villains of the episode were obvious, it did at least point towards in a certain direction. And I did like the notepad clue the most, because that clue if you were a keen observer and you were deducing what that message could be, you could figure it out that Carp, McFinn, and McGill were the villains before the gang even could, which is really cool. I like little stuff like that. So I did like the message and how that, you know, if you're a keen viewer and you try to piece together what that message could mean, you could possibly figure out the villains' true identities in the episode before the gang deduced who the villains' true identities were. So yeah, there was a good abundance of clues in the episode. They help, you know, point towards a specific suspects, even though the suspect list was very small. And they help point towards the motive of the episode and what it could possibly be and how the villains were achieving their motive. I found the atmosphere of the episode to be really good. So I really did like the whole foggy, dark night, you know, atmosphere that the episode had. I love the isolated setting. I'll get on to that in a little bit. That helped contribute to the atmosphere as well. And I love the tension and suspense throughout the episode. So the tension and suspense wasn't about the gang's safety. I wasn't fearing for the gang's safety at all because they were being locked away in different parts of the ship. So I knew the villains weren't trying to kill them, at least not yet. But the tension and suspense was me being on the edge of my seat wondering what was going to happen next. A large part of that was due to the mystery. You know, the gang slowly finding out that the professor was gone and that Mr. Carp and McFinn and McGill were gone. All that led to, you know, very, you know, a tension-filled and suspenseful atmosphere because we didn't know what happened to them, and we also don't know what's going to happen to the gang, you know, if they get caught by the villains. So it kind of connects to the mystery a lot because, like, you're engaged throughout with the mystery, and that really helps with the atmosphere, you know. Seeing all the crew members be gone and the gang by themselves on this boat with, you know, essentially and with no way of getting help besides an SOS message, which they don't even know if it got through and they don't know how long it'll take. So it really is the isolated setting and the dark, foggy night paired with the mystery aspect of the episode and being on the edge of my seat wondering where the mystery was going to take us and what was going to happen next with the gang and, you know, where we were going to find the professor and the rest of the crewmates. That really helped make the atmosphere really engaging and really tension-filled and suspenseful. So I really liked the atmosphere of this episode. And my final positive is that I thought the setting of the episode was great. So the main setting of the episode was, of course, the Sea Prowler. The Sea Prowler was the main, you know, primary setting of the episode. Now, boats aren't anything new. We've had boats before in Scooby Doo. It was in, you know, Redbeard's episode. It was in, you know, the third Harlem Globetrotters episode. Boats have been there as kind of secondary settings or, you know, kind of equal footing for the primary setting. But what makes it unique and stand out in this episode is that the boat isn't taking them anywhere, you know, to a different location. It isn't, you know, a secondary setting like in the Redbeard episode. It's not like sharing the setting aspect with, you know, Skull Island or anything. No. This is full on an isolated setting. The boat is literally the main setting of the episode. The gang go nowhere else. They are stuck on this boat in the middle of the ocean with these three villains. That's what makes it stand out and make it unique and fresh from previous boat settings. Because before this point, like in the Redbeard episode, it was kind of like the boat would be one of the settings, or it would take the gang to one of the settings. But this episode, it made it the primary focus of the setting aspect of the episode. It was the primary setting. It was the primary focus. There were no other settings throughout in the episode. The gang never went anywhere else. They were on the Sea Prowler the entire episode from beginning to end in the middle of the ocean. That made it a really unique and fresh setting because I really love the idea of the gang just being stuck on a boat in the middle of the ocean with the entire crew's gone. The only way they can get help is by trying to message the Coast Guard with Morse code, and they don't even know if it'll get through or not, and they don't know how long the Coast Guard it'll take the Coast Guard to get there. So the setting just overall just fits and it works and it contributes to the atmosphere so well. I love how unique and fresh it is compared to previous times a boat has been used as a setting in Scooby-Doo. Having a boat being the primary setting of the episode was really cool, really unique, and really fresh, and I love the idea of the gang just being stuck on a boat in the middle of the ocean with no way of getting out. They have no escape. They are literally trapped here until some ghost guard comes to their aid and helps them out. So really love the setting, love how unique and fresh it is compared to previous boat settings. It was, fantastic setting across the board. Overall, guys, I would recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. It's a really fun and enjoyable episode. I had a great time with it. It was fun watching it. It takes a lot of the previous, elements from previous shows and, makes them fresh and unique. It reinvents them and it makes something unique out of it and fresh. And that's what makes this episode great. It's not the scariest episode in the world. There are creepy aspects to it. But overall, I would say this is more of a fun and enjoyable 4 out of 5 type of episode. It's a good time. It's a good episode. I had a great time with it. And while it's not the scariest episode in the world, it is definitely a fun watch. And it reinvents previous elements and makes them fresh and unique. And that's what I really like about the episode. It takes elements from previous shows and episodes and makes them fresh and unique in this episode. And that's what I like to see. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Are you like me? Do you consider it a good episode in the series? Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Are you not big on this episode? Are there more problems to it that you see that I don't see? Or are you somewhere in the middle and think it's decent and average and okay, but it's not good or bad? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby-Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, obviously I'll have more Scooby-Doo reviews on the way. Both, Scooby Doo Show reviews. I'll have movie reviews in the future. I'm planning to get the Mystery Mayhem playthrough back up and running. I'm just trying to get a new recording device. There's been a lot of technical difficulties, but I'm getting there. I've had to replace a lot of elements, but I will get it back up and running once I get a new recording device. It's just taking more time than I would have liked. And yes, of course, I will continue the book reviews. I have plenty of comic books and wealth of book material to cover, so I'm very excited to continue that. And I have a big project, like I said, in the works of doing a big video of why I think the new Scooby-Doo movies is an underrated TV show. Because it definitely deserves it. It's a great show that deserves to be talked about and told to the public why it's an underrated show. So, have a lot of good stuff on the way. But yeah, main stuff, Scooby Doo Show reviews, of course. We'll have more of those. And obviously book reviews. And when I get more, when I get my stuff fixed, I'll be able to get back to the Mystery Mayhem playthrough as well. So if you're interested in any of those 3, if you love all things Scooby-Doo, if you're a diehard Scooby-Doo fan like me and you love, talking all things Scooby-Doo, come join the channel, experience some amazing Scooby-Doo content. Let's have a discussion. Let's talk about our favorite Mystery Inc. gang. In my next video, I will continue my reviews of the Scooby Doo Show with a review of Season 1, Episode 14 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled The Ghost That Sacked the Quarterback. I haven't seen this episode in a while, so I'm actually quite interested to see this episode, and considering it's a football-centric episode, that makes it quite interesting too, because I am a fan of football. I'm a big Patriots fan, so I do love the idea of having a mystery centered around, having a football-centered mystery or a sports-related mystery. So it definitely piques my interest. I haven't seen it in a while. I think I've heard good things about it. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to revisit it. It definitely has an interesting concept. Having it be a football-centric mystery does intrigue me a little bit. So I'm excited to see if it still holds up and we'll continue the trend of good episodes. So we'll see. But if you want to know my thoughts on the ghost that sacked the quarterback, come join me next time. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. And as always, peace out.
We got it all together for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.
Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.